Buddy will please stay. We will do our three bows. We will do three bows to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And one bow to our speaker, Venerable Samiddha. Thank y'all very much. Be seated. Oh, and it looks like the Lunar New Year's is on. Let's do it on the 22nd. So there you go. Oh, look at me being wrong. Okay. Samiddha, it's you.
Okay, thank you. So good morning, y'all. I hope you're all healthy and at peace. And before we begin, let's us recite the verse to pay homage to the Buddha. Join your palms together. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Okay, so today's talk is the continuity of a series talk called Buddhist Scholastic Tradition. And we are in the sixth talk. And today's topic is about the Great Compendium. So what is this thing? If you all still remember, there are 7 books of Abhidharma according to the Northern tradition, which we call one body and 6 feet. And then now the Mahavibhasa, or the Great Compendium in Sanskrit, is the commentary to the first book out of 7 books in the Northern Abhidharma. So it's a commentary for the foundation of knowledge. And together, these two texts, the foundation of knowledge and Mahavibhasa, or Great Compendium, are collectively referred to as the body and meaning of the Abhidharma. So it's called great because in the northern region, northwestern region of India, this school of Buddhism had a very large presence. Okay, before we begin, we have to bear in mind the one main thesis of this school, which is called Sarvasti Vada. Sarvasti means everything exists, and Vada is like the speaking or the teaching or the speech about or the teaching of everything exists. So everything here doesn't mean eternalism or that soul or self exists. Everything here is the self nature of Dharma that allows a Dharma to be causally effective. So we are going to talk about the causality, the cause and effects, and the substance of Dharma. So this school, Sarvastivada school, is kind of like the ontological realism about dharmas. Dharmas are ultimately real, possess intrinsic nature, but persons, composites, conventions are not ultimately real. So it's kind of very different from what we've learned so far about emptiness, that nothing really exists or stuff like that. So in this kind of teaching, we propose that everything exists, which might be a favorite for some people. Okay, so in chapter 23, it says that the meaning of the Abhidharma Pitaka should be understood by means of 7 things. We're just going to go very brief about these 7 things. The first 2 are causes and conditions. So Abhidharma's teaching is also about causes and conditions, just like any other schools of Buddhism. And then the third and the fourth, intrinsic characteristic and common characteristic, we'll talk about that later on. The fifth is subsumption and non-subsumption. So subsumption or sangraha in Sanskrit means holding together. It's the way to categorize and classify dharma in a way that all dharmas are subsumable with respect to their intrinsic nature, with respect to the third and fourth characteristic. For example, I faculty, right, is subsumed under the matter aggregate, the I realm, and the I element. So the basis of Abhidharma is still that triadic set, including the aggregate, the senses, and the elements. Number 6 is conjunction and disjunction. It's an investigation into the dynamic interaction among simultaneously existing mental elements. So we're going to talk about the relationship between mind and mental factors and how they arise, whether it's arise simultaneously or one by one or one at a time. And this conjunction and disjunction must be supported by the same sense organ, take the same object, have the same mode of understanding, simultaneous, be of a singular substance. So in short, they have to have one sensation, one ideation, etc., and is conjoined into one mind or one chitta or one consciousness. Number 7, endowment or non-endowment. So endowment in this here is called prapta or acquire. So this is a very highly technical term in this school. There are some things that you have to bear in mind first, such as the prapti or the acquirement. What is acquired according to this school may be lost subsequently. Acquisition of dharma. For example, if we have desire, even though it has ceased to exist, but it can continue to belong to a personal stream by virtue of the fact that a corresponding force. The prapti or the acquisition continues to link it to the person. So when the defilement is abandoned, it's not that the defilement loses any existential status. Remember, everything exists in this school, so nothing really loses or arises. They have a fixed existence. So dharmas are always existent. What happened is that the acquisition is rendered inoperative and its corresponding non-acquisition continuously preventing it from being associated with the person. Another important term is function. So we have to understand first about the substance, existence, functions, acquisition, and stuff like that. Each dharma has their own kind of ontological existence. So we are not speaking in an abstract term anymore. Okay, now this is the myth of Mahavibhasa school, and we are gonna see some of the important features that make the school called Everything Exists School. The first important feature is, of course, what we know as the intrinsic nature, the swabhava, or the self-nature. This is an extremely important technical term, sometimes also known as original nature. According to the Sarvastivadina Abhidharma masters, all phenomena, physical and mental and everything in the world, are understood as composite assemblages. Through analysis of these composites, they aim to discover the underlying singular essence within, and this is called swabhava or intrinsic nature. And there are two kinds of existence. The first one is real entities, such as the triadic thing, the three thing in a triangle, if you still remember, aggregates, elements, and senses. The second kind of existence is constructed entities. This is a conceptual, such as male, female. There's nothing real in male or female, it's just a constructed. But the aggregate, the matter, the mind, the mental factor of a person is real, right? Also, for example, what is earth? Its visible form is what worldly conception designates as earth, this earth that we all live in. This is conventional designation. This is not really in its sense, but the earth element is the quality of hardness and tactile resistance. This is real. This is the ultimate substance. Okay. And there are two types of self. The first one is self as dharma, and the second one is self as person. What the Mahavibhasa wants to propose is the first one, the self as dharma. Dharma has intrinsic nature. This is true. But what is wrong is that self as person, there is a notion of enduring individual, there is a notion of soul or self or Atman. This is wrong. This is what Sarvastivada opposes. So those who correctly understand the Dharma knows that only the real dharmic self, the first one, the self as Dharma, exists. So this intrinsic nature refers to the irreducible, indivisible essence of Dharma. Dharma has an essence, something that's incapable of further subdivision, unchanging in its true nature. This is the first important feature. And the second one is what we call atom or paramanu. Intrinsic nature of dharmas is classified into 5 categories, and these 5, we've talked about this a couple times ago. There are form or matter, mind, mental factors, formations not associated with mind, and unconditioned phenomena, right? And then the first fivefold taxonomy, the first one is called the form or the material dharmas. It can be further divided into 4. The first one is the great elements, consists of earth, water, fire, and wind. And these are considered atoms in themselves. And then the second one is 5 senses, 5 sense objects in visible or unmanifest form. The 5 senses consist of eyes, ears,
Hello? Samiddha? Looks like his PowerPoint also froze too.
one. Why? Because everything exists except for
Howdy.
the self.
Sorry, Samiddha, we in the temple just lost connection for like a minute. I'm sorry. Could could, could you I think we
Okay.
yeah, could you go back just a little bit?
Where were we? Where were you before this?
5 senses, eyes, ears, and something.
It was the 5 senses.
Were you guys here before?
Yeah, we were past this one.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we are in the atom. So what I was saying before is that the Mahavibhasa school believe that there is the smallest particle, whatever you want to name it, be it atom or quark, because everything exists. Okay, so there is the smallest unit that is indivisible anymore. And then the third feature is the mind and mental factors. So what is going on here is very a lot of material here. The inner mental activity of sentient beings is composite and integrated, and thus is referred to as a mind cluster. Mind cluster because it consists of mind, and mental factors at the same time, right? They arise in mutual association. They share the same physical basis, the same object, the same mode of engagement, and they perform the same task together. And the content of mental factors are systematized into 7 groups, similar to what we've seen so far before, but with different contents. So there are the 10 universal, 10 afflictions, 10 secondary afflictions, 10 wholesome, 5 unwholesome, 3 defiled neuter, and 10 undefiled neuter. The number in green that you see is the number of mental factors that arise together with the mind. So for example, only for the secondary affliction that they arise only one at a time and never two simultaneously. And for the number 6, the defiled neuter, what is the defiled neuter mental factor? Delusion, sloth, restlessness. It means that it's contaminated or affliction by themselves, but will not obstruct the path or will not have any result in the future. And the undefiled neuter means it's universal and will not obstruct the path. So both number 6 and number 7 are the mental factors of the sages. So if we look at what's happening here in a person's mind, it's like this. There's one mind rise, and the mind, right, is always followed by mental factors. What are the mental factors that follow the mind? They are universal or wholesome and unwholesome, depending on what state of mind a person is in. So for example, in the wholesome mind, we have the mind, only one consciousness exists at the time. So for example, when the ear hears something, it results in ear consciousness. So what is active at a moment now is the ear consciousness. But when the ear consciousness arises, it's not only by itself alone. It's always accompanied or followed by the mental factors. The fixed number of mental factors that follow it is the 10 universal, as you can see on the screen: contact, feeling, perception, volition, attention, desire, intellect, mindfulness, decision, and concentration. These 10 must be present in all kind of mental activity. Okay? And if a person is having a wholesome mind, then all the 10 wholesome mental factors also accompany the consciousness. So in total, we have at least 21 mental and mental factors arise at the moment of wholesome mind. If a person is having an unwholesome mind, then in addition to the one consciousness that arises and the 10 universal mental factors that arise, we have the affliction mental factors as opposed to the wholesome one. But in addition to the affliction mental factors, we have 1 out of 10 secondary affliction that arises. Okay, so for example, if the ear hears something bad, right? So the ear consciousness itself is kind of neuter, but what contaminates the ear consciousness is usually the mental factors, the red ones, the affliction and the secondary, right? So all the 10 afflictions arise. That's what make a mind is unwholesome instead of wholesome. But then it's also accompanied by another secondary affliction, but only one at a time out of the 10 secondary affliction. Such as, for example, if you look at the secondary mental factor, there are avarice, arrogance, anger, vengeance, maliciousness, cruelty, envy, concealment, pretension, and wickedness. So only one out of these 10 can arise at a time. Okay, and this string of mind phenomena is very fast. They appear and disappear and appear again with a new set of mind cluster. That's why when one is doing insight or vipassana meditation, the purpose is to observe such phenomena one by one at a very fast speed. That's why a very, very high jhana or concentration is always needed, almost always needed in order to kind of observe our own mind and mental factors that is really, really fast. So speaking of speed, right, how fast is it? And then we move on to the next important feature of this school. The fourth one is called moment and space. Okay, is there a time? Is there a space? So let's see, what is moment or shana in Sanskrit? It's really similar to the Chinese chana. It is the shortest unit of time, and its dharma arises and ceases instantly. Okay. Sarvastivada is three-time realism or temporal realism about dharma, but not eternalism or nor presentism. So time is not treated as a separate real entity. So there's no entities or substance as time, but time exists. I think this is the hardest part, and everything is important here. And the most important part of the Sarvastivada school, it deals with time, right? So time is rather a conceptual designation dependent on the activity of conditioned phenomena. Conditioned phenomena are characterized by arising and ceasing. So what is time? Time, according to Sarvastivada, is called present, future, and past. So does it mean the present, future, and past exist? No. What is called present is the moment of arising and ceasing that is happening at this moment. The future is that which has not arisen, and the past that which has already ceased. So please memorize this definition first, because the way of how this school understands present, future, and past is very different from our conventional daily understanding, regular understanding of the present, future, and past. So the world, right? Our world is equated with time, spoken of from the perspective of the succession of multiple dharmas from past to present. So the function of dharma or the activity is what makes time exist. So if viewed from the arising and ceasing of each individual dharma, then the three times unfold as a process from future to present, from present to past. In other words, time is a conceptual designation grounded in the function status of dharma. Three times are real derivatively, but not real substantially. That's why when we say everything exists, does time exist, then we have to define what existence is. Okay. Now about the space element before we come back to the time again. The space element is the gap between material substances, right? And we also have another technical term called void. It's very, very mystic thing. It's an unconditioned dharma, absence of obstruction, and not subject to arising or ceasing. So it's very similar to nirvana as a state, but for material thing. So the concept of void is conceived as absolute non-obstructive space. It's not matter, but it serves as the support or basis for the existence and activity of material forms, right? or it's analogous to the modern notion of ether. In physics, we can't really speak of ether because it has no wave, radiation, and movement, right? So it's often rejected due to its undetectability. But for Sarvastivada thought, void is conceived as absolute, non-obstructive space. So a lot of the things here that I mentioned, if you're not really clear, you can ask question at the end of this talk or discuss things or clarify things, and it's really needed. Okay, so we have the whole arrangement here is that from void appears first. It's kind of like predetermined. And then from void arises the space element, from space elements, which then supports the four grid elements at their atomic level, from which arise constructed forms. And then we have mind and mental factors. So you can see the sign from constructed form and mind and mental factors is kind of like interdependence. Not only that, mind and mental factors need material thing, but the material thing also needs the mental activity, right? And then lastly, we have this chain of causality. So we have a chain of causality from void to consciousness. So far, right, Sarvastivadin masters propose some features in alignment with their thesis, which is everything exists. So there are first, intrinsic nature. Second, there is atom. Third, which is here, there is a space. And fourth, there is a void. And these four are considered a real substances. The exception is time, which is not a real substance. Okay. So let us take a look on what is going on the debate of time and existence, which can be attested in Gandharya Abhidharma. So this is a critique on Sarvastivadin view, likely from the presentism view. So this is the opposite of what we've learned so far. The critique says, you say, referring to our school, everything exists at all times, everywhere, in every respect, by every reason, with all modes of beings, by all causes, by all conditions, everything exists, right? This is our school's thesis. So in philosophy, especially during the debate, the opponent needs to present the proponent's view by the principle of charity first, then refute them later. So here, the opponent is presenting our school's view first. And then it goes on saying, what exists is everything, yet what exists is not everything. Dharmas that are included in the 12 sense spheres exist. Existence may be said to be dharmas of three times, which are not mixed together. Existence is three times themselves. What exists should be called existence. What does not exist should be called non-existence. The existence should be called existence. The non-existence should be called non-existence. So this is our school's view. And then moving on, the critique is like this. It is not the case that everything exists. So here it begins to refute. Nor is it the case that everything does not exist. A past factor exists without efficacy, without function. For example, an arhat may have had desire, anger, and delusion in the past before they achieved liberation. The past should be referred to as nothing but the past. The future should be referred to as nothing but the future. The present should be referred to as nothing but the present. Okay? And then the refutation continues saying, the great Sarvastivadin maintains that everything exists. But if you say everything exists, then you have to say that the soul exists, the personhood exists, the individual exists, the six aggregate exists. This is wrong, right? Because we only have five aggregate. And the 13th sense sphere exists. It's wrong, right? Because we only have 12. The 19th element exists. It's wrong, right? We only have 18. And this is the funny one, that a fifth noble truth exists. Wrong, right? We only have 4. So the way this school is doing is kind of like showing the logical fallacy in our school's argument. Okay? Because if everything means everything exists, then everything means that you can add something up, because nothing cannot be a non-existence. Everything is possible and exists, right? And then in conclusion, it says, when you say everything exists at all times, look at this, then the afternoon will exist in the morning, and the morning will exist in the afternoon. The past and the future will exist in the present, and so on with regard to other times. Is it a sharp criticism? So how does our school, the Sarvastivadins, solve this? Did they not know that there might be some arguments against them would come up? Well, of course they know. They have anticipation far in advance already. And the next feature will answer this. So if still nothing is clear to you, let's discuss this later on. Okay, we have causality across the 3 times, right? The doctrine that all 3 times exist, past, present, and future, is the hallmark conic code of the Sarvastivadin school. What exists cannot become non-existent. What is non-existent cannot become existent. So everything is in a fixed state, not flux. There are 2 standpoints. First, the external existence of dharma substance, they exist across the 3 times. But the function of this substance might not necessarily exist all the time, right? When it's functioning, we call that an existence. When it's not in function, then we can, kind of conceptually call it non-existent, but in fact, their substances, their intrinsic nature are always there. Okay, so let's move on. There are 2 complementary aspects of this. The first one is that dharma substance, even though they exist at all times, they're not arising by itself, but dependent on others. That's why we call it causality. It still needs causes and conditions. Intrinsic activity distinctive to each dharma. Each conditioned dharma possesses its own inherent and unchanging nature. Its dharma is distinct, and its activity is proper to itself. So, for example, the eye, what is the substance or the intrinsic nature of eye? Is to see a visible forms. This is their inherent nature. Even though the process of seeing requires supporting conditions such as distance, light, objects, right? But the function of seeing is inherent to the eye. So that's why we call the function is still there, but the substance, is always there, but the function might be functioning or might be not. So the capacity to see is the intrinsic to the eye sense itself. The eye sense is the self nature. Causes and conditions merely assist the manifestation of an already existent function. The actual activity belongs to the self nature of the dharma, right? And then neither the intrinsic nature of a dharma nor its activity arises newly from causes. The substance is not produced by causality. It's there always, forever. And the function is simply the revelation of what is already inherent. So kind of the causes and conditions make the function possible. It's not creating a new function, right? So there's this quote, all dharmas function through conditions, but the function itself belongs inherently to each dharma's own nature. So for example, eye has the self nature of seeing, ear has the intrinsic nature of listening, whether it's active or not, right? And tongue has the intrinsic nature of tasting, and so on and so forth. So if we put everything into image, you can see, right? What is called past, present, and future is not the time exists ontologically in itself or by itself. It exists, we can say past, present, and future because the Dharma substance exists all the time, right? And what is called present is, this is very important. What is called present is because that Dharma substance is functioning at the moment. For example, your eye is seeing the screen. So your eye substance is functioning. That's why we say you are seeing in the present tense, right? Your ear is listening, it's functioning. The ear substance is functioning right now. So that's why it's called present, it's called now. But what is called past is because the eye function or the ear function or the dharma substance has already functioned or has ceased to function. That's why I call past. And the future is that the dharma substance is yet to function. That's why it's called future. Clear so far or confusing? So the circle, the red circle, is the Dharma substance. It always exists everywhere, everywhere. So the important point is that Dharma is not time, existence is not function, the cessation of function is not non-existence. This is the crux. Time is named after function, not the reverse, not because we have time, that's why we say there is Dharma, but because we have Dharma, then we can say of time. So for instance, when the karma no longer operates, it's designated as past, but its self-nature or the substance of karma remains. And that substance is what guarantees future ripening. So this school is trying to explain the karma at 3 times, right? For example, if you do good deeds, if you do good things, if you do generosity, for example, after you've done this generosity act, you earn good karma. This is our regular way of saying, right? But when it ripes in the future, how does it work? Where does the karma sit stored? Is it in, where is it stored? Right? If you don't propose this kind of function and dharma substance, then you have to propose another thing. For example, the Yogacara school, they propose the notion of alaya vijnana, or the 8 consciousness. All the seeds, all the nature is stored in this kind of placeholder called the 8 consciousness. Right? So everyone must have something to say in order to explain why our good deeds that is done today will ripe in the future. The ripening is not by reactivating the past according to our school. A future result dharma already exists. It's just not yet to function. When conditions arise, it becomes present and functional, like you can see, right? So the causation works like this. Past cause exists, but inactive. Present conditions active, that's why it's called present, and future results become present if the function is activated. The self-nature exists fixed, predetermined. Okay. The last important feature is specific and general characteristic. So we've been saying about the distinctive quality of a dharma. For example, aggregates, senses, elements, this triadic set have their own function. Like what I just said, eye has the function of seeing by itself, ear, and so on and so forth. This is called a specific characteristic. The general characteristics is the common ground for all of this dharma. And they were linked to the Four Noble Truths and their 16 aspects. We are not going into that. So the practical usage of this is that the specific characteristic is used to penetrate the inherent essence of dharma. We have to reach until the smallest part. But the general characteristic is the framework of contemplation to realize liberation. And usually, what is the content of general characteristic? It's impermanence, dukkha, and non-self. These are all common in all dharma, in all mental phenomena, as well as the matter. Okay. So lastly, I want you to think about this because questions might arise in terms of practice, in terms of practicality. So we've been talking about something that is very, very similar to philosophy, right? So when we speak of the relationship between Abhidharma and the practice, it actually means Abhidharma versus Sutra, right? Even though you don't call the practice Sutra, but I know what you mean by practice, right? We always refer to Sutra as suitable for practice, right? It seems that the Sutra alone is sufficient for liberation and practice. However, the truth is today's Sutra and Abhidharma hold the same position in which they were all products of schools of Buddhism from a much more later period than the Buddha, right? So I want you to contemplate on these two sentences. The first one is that liberation does not require philosophy. It's true, because the main problem is clinging. Clinging is the main poison. As long as we can deal with the clinging, then we are basically liberated, not the philosophical aspect or the ontology of Dharma. The second one, which is also true, is that this school produced countless arhants. It means that the system also provides correct understanding of Dharma, which leads to dispassion, which then leads to cessation or liberation. So there are two truths in this case. Sutra teachings is earlier than Abhidharma, is true, and many attain liberation from practicing the teaching in the sutras alone only. But it's also true that many attain liberation from practicing the teaching in the Abhidharma. So why Abhidharma matters in this sense? One way to say it is liberation may occur without Abhidharma, but the teaching cannot, right? Modern, what we call sutra-based Buddhism is actually operates through Abhidharma and commentary at the level of explanation, diagnosis, and method. The real choice is not whether to use Abhidharma, but whether to do so consciously or unconsciously, right? And unacknowledged Abhidharma is more dangerous than explicit Abhidharma. So the only real choice is whether to study it consciously or unconsciously. Even today's meditation methods taught by a lot of modern teachers, even though they label that the teaching is based on the sutra, but actually in reality, it's based on the commentary or Abhidharma. We can't really just read the sutra and practice meditation, because what does the sutra say about the practice of mindfulness, for example? It doesn't tell you to do body scanning. It doesn't tell you to do breath counting. It doesn't tell you to do how you position your posture, how you close your eyes, how you place your tongue, right? So what's the modern teachers teach today, whether consciously or not, is actually already based on commentary from the teacher's lineage or Abhidharma. Or even if they don't follow Abhidharma system, when they try to explain, to make a comment on the sutra, this kind of activity by itself is already Abhidharma, right? You reject the already established Abhidharma, but then you create your own Abhidharma system in teaching. Okay, so this is all from me for today. And before we move to the Q&A session, which is very interesting about time, maybe, let us do the transfer of merits first. So join your palms together. May my merit leads to the destruction of the pollutants. May my merit be a condition for gaining nirvana. I share my portion of merits with all beings. May all of them share my portion of merits evenly. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
So, questions from the temple or online? We have a question in the temple.
Maybe I feel like the word dharma, maybe I don't understand it. So my original understanding was that it was maybe teachings, but it seems like it's used in this presentation as like a thing with a substance or maybe a state of being. So could you, when that word is used, what's the correct understanding?
Did you hear that?
Yeah. Yes, good question. So the dharma, the term dharma in Abhidharma is no longer a teaching of a Buddha. It means a phenomena mental activity. So it consists of matter, mind, and mental factors, all the phenomena that is happening in the world, all the smallest substance, those all are called dharma.
Thank you.
So I have a question, and I guess this is, I may be fundamentally misunderstanding how this is like trying to describe the world. It just seems like it's trying. It seems like it's trying to get back to some kind of inherent characteristic, which would be antithetical to the idea of non-self, because once you start saying that something has some kind of fixed characteristic, you've created a self. And I'm not understanding how it's squaring the circle of giving an intrinsic characteristic while not fixing something in such a way that it can't change.
Okay, so I think there is the explanation in the slide that there are two types of self. The first one is self as dharma, and the second one is self as person. What's in the early sutras saying is there's non-self as person. So there is no continuity, the self as understood in the sense of soul or personhood, that this person exists. What Sarvastivada proposes is that the self doesn't exist, so it agrees with the notion of non-self. But and the composites, what makes a person, this whole notion of composites also doesn't exist. But the smallest unit, what makes a person exists. So the aggregates, the senses, the elements, those exist. So the Dharma, the smallest unit, exists, but the conception, the designation notion, the conventional truth doesn't exist.
Okay. So I can follow that. I guess what confuses me is why we need to get to something like an atom like the idea of like an atom, effectively, because it seems like it's basically recreating a soul, like something that is fixed and unchanging, but just not placing it within a person or or an object or something. Well, I mean, it would be an object. It'd be something in the world. It seems like it's recreating the problem, but shifting it away from like me to an outside phenomena.
Yeah, this is the critique that the Sarvastivadin school always get. So the notion is that it doesn't matter if it exists or not, because it matters only when it's functioning. As long as it's not functioning, it's not related to ourselves, to us as person, and to liberation. So the why did they establish this kind of atom? It's just the way, their philosophical way to understand the world, rather than you say everything is emptiness. So it just doesn't make any sense, because the real world is really tangible. We can touch it. Whether we are there or not, it's still there. All the forests out there are still there, whether we are there or not. So yeah, function and substance. We should understand that first.
Got it. Okay. So uh, what it's trying to do is explain the metaphysics of the world, effectively.
Not only the metaphysics of the world, but the theological justification within the Buddhism, such as how does the karma have such an effect in the future? What matters if what we did in this lifetime to the future life? If it's emptiness, if it's kind of like disconnected from present life to the future life, why does it matter to practice Buddhism at all? Why does it matter to do good deeds and avoid bad deeds if it's disconnected phenomena, right? So it's not the case. We all have our substance that in our mind cluster. It's always there. All the karmas, all the things are already there. It's just wait to function, or has functioned according to causes and conditions.
Perfect. Thank you.
Judy?
Thank you so much for a very interesting and fascinating analysis of this Sarvastivasa school, that everything exists. So this school is quite different from what we have been learning actually in the EDG. What we've been experienced, we've been learning is about like emptiness. We more or less learn more about the Madhyamaka school's teaching, because it teaches us everything is empty. It's all dependent, originating. Even the the Sarvastivasa school says that the Dharma is actually intrinsic, it's existing. But from what we usually learn from the Heart Sutra and Diamond Sutra, everything is empty. Even the Dharma itself is transitional, it's a dependent originated, it's empty. So it's quite different. It's a different school teaching. So it takes a little bit to come to, because that's not what we are accustomed to learning. Okay. So, but we can understand where it's coming from, and try to put, because emptiness, a lot of people, very difficult to accept everything is empty. So you have to give them something is real for them to hold on. After them hold on to this concept, then they say, okay, then I can accept, and then I can maybe learn about, actually practice and learn. So my question is that I don't quite understand that in one of your slides, you say the void, and you said the void. Can you give us an example? What is a void in this Sarvastivasi school? What does it mean? Example of a void. And
Yeah.
you also say the void, after the void comes the space element. After the space element comes the four great elements as the atom. And then there comes the constructive form, which I can understand. And from that comes the mind and mental factor, and then comes the chance of causality. But I can't quite catch the idea. It sounds like everything came from the void. How does the void evolve into the space element? And how does the space element evolve into the four great elements? That I can't quite catch the idea. The whole
Yeah. So the void does not evolve into space element. So you can understand the void as a placeholder for all the matter and mental activities in the world. It's the base, it's the placeholder, right? So for example, when you try to understand what was it like before the earth was formed, there's void, kind of like that notion. That's why it's called unconditioned, 虚空. So it has a similar position with nirvana. That's why I said nirvana is kind of like the state after we attain liberation, right? It's just there. You can't say that it's there or it's not there. It's just the state of non-arising and non-ceasing. The same with the void, but it's just for a matter thing. It's not for liberation. This is the creation, a unique creation of Sarvastivadin school. They try to explain everything. Why? Because everything exists. Right.
But so is the void. It's void too. It exists too. But it's not
Yes.
in a. But when we learn about this school, we learn the mind factor, the by aggregate, all those are real, but we didn't talk about void as real.
Yeah, you don't have to say that the void exists because it's unconditioned. So the basis, when we say something, there must be void in the underlying existence. We can't really say it exists or not exists because, yeah, what exists will cease, and that's why it's conditioned if we say it exists. So what we can say is just that there's this underlying thing. We usually don't discuss void that much because as long as there is an existence, there must be void in the basis, in the background.
So there's not a real world example of the void. So I'm thinking about the Big Bang, the before the Big Bang, the
You can
universe before
understand
the
it.
Big Bang. It's
Yes.
the void. Can
You can understand that way concretely. Yeah, but it doesn't mean once the Big Bang happened, then the void disappeared. No, it's always there and always will be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any comments from the temple?
Any other questions from the temple?
Okay, we have Bruce online.
Yeah.
Hey, I just thought I'd just jump in here. I don't know if you can see me or not, but anyway, somewhere I remember hearing that formations are emptiness and emptiness is formations, but everything arises from emptiness. And I think that kind of goes along with what Judy was talking about. I don't know where I heard that at though, but I like that saying.
That saying is from Madhyamaka school or the school of emptiness, but they don't define what is emptiness. Emptiness is the phenomenological thing, the way you explain something. But yeah, you can follow along the Sarvastivada arguments that in which emptiness here is understood as void. Everything arises from void. Okay. Any more questions?
We don't have anything else from the temple. Anybody else online?
I wonder if people will write on the suggestion for a topic. Oh, I want to learn Abhidharma. I wonder if people do that.
Well, we will see. We will see.
Yeah.
I'll be happy to share whatever they ask.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So with that, we will end for today. If everybody will please stand, we'll do our 3 bows. 3 bows to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And 1 bow to our speaker today, Venerable Samiddha. Thank you all very much.